Welcome to Tales from the Cryptographers. My name is Daniel Burgess. Today we're going to be discussing what is cryptography in Hebrew literature. I started this presentation series to share information about a book I'm writing called The Beginner's Guide to Casting the God Spell. And I've been studying the Bible for most of my life, since I was about 7 years old. And I am a free thinking person, and I learned how to study the Bible academically, follow academic publications and circles, and keep up with the scholastic community. And the more I began to understand the Bible, and the more my transformation, the more my understanding was transformed over the years, what I see in Hebrew literature is completely unknown to the organized religious community in America. And what I found in the scriptures is that the Bible's not what people tell you it is. The church declared war on what the Bible really is, and that's the fascinating thing. There's no other way to really say it to you in a way that'll make it like easy to hear, and it's really hard for me to do what I'm doing. But the Bible was written by magicians who practiced an ancient craft of magic that's inseparable from storytelling. Storytelling and language itself, and writing down words, is 100% a magical art form. And the people that actually wrote the Bible encrypted Hebrew literature in an extremely ornamental fashion. That's amazing. Like, what they put in Hebrew literature is absolutely amazing, because they didn't just write a story down. The way they wrote the story down, the structure of the words, every letter on the page is part of the story beyond the narrative. They built structures and patterns and wove numbers all through the scriptures that harmonize and express the stories, but express their intent of the stories. I always knew that the answer to understanding Hebrew literature was to know what the authors intended. I mean, it's kind of common sense to know what the author meant, but a lot of people don't like the idea that they had an exact meaning, but of course they did. They wrote it down. Of course they had an exact meaning. It's ridiculous to think otherwise. And when I learned about literary framing, which is a technique that the writers of scriptures use to build a frame out of the words on the page, on the scrolls that they wrote, I knew that was the fast track. Like, whoa, that's something that the author created 100%. So, at a certain point, I realized that the structures that they were building out of the frames of the literature complemented the stories in different ways, and there were patterns of the way that they wrote the story that they're acting out inside of the story. And this is heavily connected to microcosmic thinking, as above so below, and I want to explain some of that to you today, so you can have a frame of reference for what I'm actually talking about when I talk about encryption in Hebrew literature. Because I can't explain how this is all a system of magic crafted by sorcerers, because that's what the Bible is. I'm sorry, and I really hope you don't turn it off just for me saying that, and just like try to hear me out for a while, because I'm telling the truth, and these are things that you can go verify for yourself. Like, you'll be able to look up and investigate and find out that I'm not just blowing the wind. Like, this is a real thing. Like, but the word encryption means to put something in the crypt. It means what it sounds like. And the crypt was a tomb or a coffin, stone coffin, and where you put a dead body. So the idea of encryption is that there's something hidden within. You know, you look on the outside, you see a box, but on the inside there's a human body. It represents a whole person's life and death. And I have come across more than a few Christians who are really offended by the notion that God would hide anything in the literature, and I find that to be sad. The Bible is one of the most obviously encrypted books in existence, and they're openly telling you that the things that they're saying signify and symbolize something else and have deeper meaning, and they do this throughout the book. In the book of Daniel, the end of the book, after Daniel, the book of Daniel ends with 3 or 4 visions, long visions, chapters like 7 through 11 or something like that. And they're the most detailed series of visions of prophecy in the Bible. They're really just an elaborate account of it fits into a large portion of history. I'm not going to get into that, but when it's an enormous amount of verbiage describing this prophecy, you know, and there's monsters rising out of the sea, and, you know, mystic sons of men like the Ancient of Days, and they're having cosmic battles, and the fate of the world's in the balance, and, you know, it's just all this crazy imagery, and Daniel doesn't understand it when it's over. He's like, what do these things mean? And it says in Daniel 12 verses 8 and 9, I heard, but I understood not. And I said, O my Lord, what shall the end of these things be? And he said, go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed until the time of the end. So Daniel's telling you, he don't even understand all the stuff he wrote down, and he wants to understand it, and God's telling him it's sealed and it's closed up. Closed up in Hebrew is the word satam, which means to keep secret. God's going to keep it a secret. And sealed is the word chatham, and it means to lock away. So you need a key to unlock the meaning. And God's directly telling Daniel that he's kept this stuff a secret from him. He's not letting us know the meaning, and it's locked away, so you're going to have to find a key. Where are you going to get the key? But Revelations, the book of Revelation contains probably the most famous instance of encryption in the Hebrew Bible. And they tell you in Revelation 13 verse 18, here is wisdom, let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. So they're telling you they're talking about a person. They're telling you they're giving you a number instead of his name, and they're telling you to calculate the name from the number. The word count is the word sephidzo, and it means to calculate. So you're going to have to compute the number 666 into a person's name. How are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? Like, most of y'all have never heard of Gematria, but Gematria is the thing where they numbered the alphabet, and it was a popular thing in the first century when John wrote the book to write down a person's number instead of their name, and this number was based off of spelling their name with an alphabet, and they had a numerical value for each letter of the alphabet. How are you going to know that that's even a thing? How are you going to find out about that? How are you going to find out about Gematria? You're going to have to meet somebody that knows. It's more complicated than that. Not only the mark of the beast is Caesar Nero. That's his name adds up to 666. 666. If you spell it in Hebrew and use the Gematria, the alphanumeric system of the Hebrew alphabet, to calculate the name Kaiser Neron. And some of the ancient manuscripts don't have 666 as the mark of the beast. They have 616 as the mark of the beast. And in Latin, they dropped the N off of Neron. So it was Kaiser Nero, and N has a value of 50 in the Hebrew. So you have two witnesses that Kaiser Nero is the name that they're referring to, and why wouldn't they be? He was one of the number one persecutors of Christians in the Roman Empire, and he killed a couple of the apostles. And so you're going to have to know about Gematria. You're going to have to know to spell the word that they're the name that they're talking about in Hebrew, and then you're going to have to calculate the number of his name. How are you going to figure all that out unless somebody tells you? You're going to have to seek an answer until you find it, until you meet somebody that knows that this is Hebrew culture and this is what they do. There's no other way, and that's the nature of encryption. You have to find the key. And the Bible is telling you that they've hidden things in it and that you need to go find a key. And it shouldn't be a surprise. People don't like it because they're afraid that they don't know something. They're afraid to acknowledge that they might have to learn something to understand something better. See, they want to understand the Bible just fine the way they are now, and so they resist this type of thing. And and I'm talking about magic and sorcery, and I'm going to continue to talk about magic and sorcery until I die, as long as I'm talking about Hebrew literature, because it's inextricably connected to magic and sorcery. And that's another thing people are afraid of. And they're afraid because the church has declared war on understanding the Bible. They didn't want people to understand the Bible. That's why they took it away in the Dark Ages. That's why the Reformation had to happen. And millions of people had to die to get the Bible back from the Catholic Church. Because they don't want people to understand the Bible and empower themselves with an ancient craft of magic. And they've been trying to bury it. And that's the whole thing. But people will inevitably say that that's esotericism or Kabbalism, and I'm not an esoterist, nor am I a Kabbalist. I am a Bible lover. I'm a person who has studied the Bible with all of his heart for a long time, for most of my life. And seek and you shall find, and the answers that I found are not for everybody, but I know that they will 100% make the Bible make perfect sense. I can assure you that. But I can't assure that I can deliver it. I'm going to try. But so I'm going to tell you about Atbash. Atbash is an obscure method of encryption that the writers of scriptures used. It only occurs, they say it only occurs 6 times. And some people say it only occurs 3 times in the book of Jeremiah. But I'm under the suspicion that it probably occurs a lot more than just 6 times. But, when you see what Atbash is, you'll see why it would be kind of an unknown thing if they are doing it more. But Atbash is, it stands for A, T, B, and S, H, or I guess it's Aleph, Tav, Bayit, Shin in Hebrew. It stands for the first letter of the alphabet, A, and the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which is T, A-T, and then the second letter of the alphabet, B, and the second to last letter, S-H. So A for T, B for S-H. And what they would do with Atbash is they would reflect the alphabet in the mirror. And that would be the cipher, the inverted, like if you put the alphabet in a mirror, it would be backwards in the reflection. And so you just put the backwards alphabet under the alphabet, and the first letter is the last letter. You just switch the letters one for one, opposite of each other. And I don't have to read all 3. I'll put them on the screen. But Jeremiah 25 verse 26, all the kings of the north and the far far and near, one another, and all the kingdoms of the world which are upon the face of the earth. The king of Sheshach shall drink after them. And Sheshach is, some scholars say that that's a name of a goddess of Babylon, one of the goddesses they worshipped. But if you, the spelling of that is SS, what letter is that? I think it's Samek. I'm sorry, I don't know what letter that is off the top of my head. But if you decipher it with Atbash, it spells Babel. So, and Babel was where they worshipped this goddess. And people seem to be really confused by what the cryptographers of Hebrew literature were up to. And it's because they can't see the bigger picture that this is all a craft of magic. But, you know, they're talking about Babel, but they've confused it. They've scrambled the letters. Well, how did Babel begin? It was when God confused the languages. So they're just acting out what God did when they're talking about Babel. They're confusing it. And it's kind of just expressing the narrative. And this is what they do. But the method of Atbash itself and reflecting the alphabet in the mirror and seeing its opposite comes straight out of the creation narrative. In Genesis 1 verse 1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth were without form and void, and God's spirit hovered on the face of the deep. So Elohim is the word God, and that means the source of all power, the source of existence. So it's telling you the source of something. And it says created. Create is the word bar, the Hebrew word bar, and it means to cut or divide. So God cut or divided heaven and earth from where? From the source. It's giving you all the information you need. And then it says that heaven and earth were dark and chaotic and desolate, meaning that life couldn't survive in the sea of chaos. They call this the primordial sea of chaos. And then it describes, so it's the opposite of God. He's light and he's the giver of life, and he cuts himself. He hurts himself to give life to what he generates, to what he creates. And then what he created is the opposite of himself, and life can't survive in it. It'll destroy life. So God's looking into the first thing he manifested, and it's the complete opposite of himself. It's still his soul substance, and God's going to generate our whole universe out of his soul substance by transforming it, by cutting it and dividing it from himself. And then he looks at it, he hovers on the surface of the deep. What happens when you look into the surface of the water? You see your reflection. So God's looking at his reflection, but he's seeing the opposite of himself. And that's what's happening with Atbash. And it's acting out the creation narrative. And the other methods of encryption follow this same pattern of imitating and animating God's behavior and the behavior of heaven and earth in the universe. So Atbash is interesting. Interestingly enough, there's 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, and if you put 11 in the mirror with 11, you're cutting it in half and reflecting it, so that's 11 in the mirror. And so 11 for you synchronicity junkies comes out of Hebrew mysticism and cryptography. So literary frames, I'll give you another example of a literary frame. There's three major methods of encryption. Literary framing, integration, which has a couple of different aspects, but you transform one story into another story. That's the essence of integration. And then there's Gematria, and Gematria is directly encrypting the text with the cipher, and this letter represents this number, or these other letters, you have a cipher, direct encryption. Gematria is a part of that. So, but literary framing, the book of Leviticus is actually structured in the shape of the temple that the book's about. The book is about the priests who live in the sanctuary, the tabernacle that Moses built in the wilderness when they wandered for 40 years. It's about the priestly service inside of that tabernacle, and the whole book that's telling you what to do in that building is shaped like that building. Gary Rinsberg, peer-reviewed her work on that, but you can see the structure in this picture. But Mary Douglas is one of the greatest anthropologists to touch literary form criticism in Hebrew literature, and I recommend all of her books because she was one of the most wonderful people, wonderful scholars. She put so many pieces of the puzzle together. It's unbelievable. But the most common form of literary framing in Hebrew literature, hand over fist, is called chiasmus, ring composition, or parallelism. And chiasmus is mirroring, just like Atbash, a mirroring of the alphabet. In the book Alice in Wonderland, with the Mad Tea Party, they have a series of chiasmus, and Alice says, I mean what I say and I say what I mean, and I mean what I say in the mirror is I say what I mean. Like, they're reflecting the words as their opposite, in the opposite order. And almost every single book in the Bible has chiasmus. And so sometimes they just have a sentence or two, like Alice in Wonderland example I just made, and sometimes an entire book will be structured in a ring or a parallelism. And what they would do is they would write the story in sections. So it'd be like A, B, C, D, and then you'd pass through the mirror and it'd be D, C, B, A. And they would link A and A on both sides of the mirror with an event or a phrase or they had a method of stamping and signifying the sections on the rings. And so A would match A on both sides, B would match B on both sides, C would match C on both sides. Hence they were parallel, is why they call it parallelism. There's a famous book from another culture. It's called Madhumalati. Yeah, I believe that's how you say it. And it's structured in a circular story that you can see the geometric form it creates. And this is the shape of the symbol of the heart in this culture, and it's a love story. And on every side of the circular story where the lovers are united, on the opposite end they separate. So no matter where you go in the story, if the lovers get together on the opposite ring, on the opposite side of the mirror, they separate. And they make the pattern of the heart out of the structure of the spokes of the wheel of the circle story. And this is a really advanced one. Oxford publication revealed all of the secrets of its encryption. But it also makes their calendar. It also represents their meditation system. So they were literally encoding information into the structure of the story, and that's what they're doing with the Bible. In the book of Genesis is 4 large circle stories. I believe it was Gary Rinsberg who evaluated chiasmus in the book of Genesis. And the primeval story, Genesis from chapter 1 to chapter 11, is written in a circle. It's actually written in an inverted circle, which would be like a concave mirror that turns the story upside down. You can pause the clip if you want to get a closer look at that. But this is what it looks like in a circle. And the Abraham's story is written in a circle. Israel's story is written in a circle. And Joseph's story is written in a circle. So the scroll itself was considered a circle. Like the name of the Torah, they'll still call it Sefer Torah, and Sefer comes from that word cipher. People, it's funny, people try to say the Bible wouldn't have anything hidden in it. It's like, dude, that, like, the Jews call it the cipher, Sefer Torah. You know, it's just a word for scroll, but a scroll is considered a circle story, and it's where we get the word cipher from, where you encrypt information. So it's 4 circles in a circle. Well, that gives you a layout to make geometric forms, and each one of those 4 circle stories, the first 2 are broken into 10 sections, so you got 2 decagons out of the 2 first circle stories, and then the latter 2 circle stories of Jacob and Joseph, those are written in 12-point stories, 6 on both sides of the reflection. So those are hexagonal circle stories. So they're creating geometric forms out of the structure of the stories. The book of Numbers is written in 12 sections, and the opening of the book of Numbers describes the camp and how 12 camps camped around the tabernacle with Moses in the wilderness. And that's what the book of Numbers is about, when they wandered for 40 years. And so the camp in 12 sections is the structure of the book, which also represents the calendar of the year, which is broken into 12 months or moons. And it's a huge thing in biblical literature that Israel represented the kingdom of heaven, and that they literally represented the stars on earth. And there's several visions, and there's several passages of scripture that describe this in great detail. There's many, many passages in scripture that come out of astronomy. I had to learn astronomy over the years to really understand what was going on with the stars in the Bible. But the 12 camps represented the 12 signs of the zodiac, which are considered 12 houses or camps or tents for the sun throughout the year. And in Numbers chapter 21, Moses hangs a serpent on a pole in the center of the camp. And when he did this, he made Israel, the camp, an exact map of the celestial sphere, because in the middle of the circle of the 12 signs of the zodiac in the northern hemisphere is the constellation Draco, and on the pole of the ecliptic, which the zodiac's properly called the ecliptic, on the pole of the ecliptic sits the breast of the constellation Draco. So you literally have a serpent on a pole in the sky around 12 camps, like in the sky. So the structure of the book is it's microcosmic thinking. You know, you got heaven, you know, and now you got this book that's shaped like heaven. So when you read it, it behaves like heaven, and it's about a story of people that are in the image and shape of heaven, and they're acting like heaven on earth. You know, it's microcosmic thinking, and in this way, they're possessing the literature with the spirit of heaven and causing it to actually energize heaven as a force when you read it. And so when you read it and those words go into your mind, then you're getting possessed by the book. You're getting that energy form. Like this, if you know the story, that story is structured to flow and you read it in the nature of heaven. So if it's in your mind and you know the story, then you've got the nature of heaven in you. This is direct divination. But it's really that was supposed to be like my finish right there. But I didn't tell you about integration of Gematria yet. Oh. So integration, well, I didn't finish about literary framing. So with literary framing, the circle story represents night and day. Psalms 19 says, day unto day utters, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork, the firmament that he created in the 6 days of creation. And it says, day unto day utters speech, night unto night showeth knowledge. And it goes on to describe the circle of the sun as a circuit. You know, the sun circles the earth. They focus on this. And when it says heavens declare, declare is the word safar. It's the same word cipher that we're talking about, and it means to tell a circle story. Original ciphers for decrypting encrypted literature were circular. So all of that's connected. And so when they write a story in the circle, you're taking the character, which signifies the sun, passing through the circle and going through the day and night of his journey. And this is how all of our stories of our life unfolds with each day, with each circle of the sun. So the story of the day is a circle. And so that's the way heaven tells our stories. That's where circle storytelling comes from. They're acting like heaven acts, telling the story of our lives, and they're telling the story just like God and the universe and heaven tells our story. So that's what they're doing. And encryption is not any different. So every circle story that came before today is the seed that germinates today's circle story. Like today's story grows out of all of the past combined, and when today, right now, the present moment becomes yesterday, like it'll be one with all of the past together to be the seed for today. And since this is true about nature, they're going to imitate this with the way that they tell stories. And one of the ways that they this is a huge thing, and it's not just limited to Hebrew literature. Back to Alice in Wonderland. Alice in Wonderland is a reshaping and a retelling of the myth of Persephone. And that was a retelling of the myth of Ishtar and her descent into the underworld. And so that's what you do. You take a past story and you transform it into a new story. That's integration of narrative. And the Bible's heavily encrypted with Canaanite mythology, Greek mythology, Persian mythology, Babylonian mythology, Egyptian mythology. There's a ton of other mythos in the Bible. And it's because it's part of this craft of storytelling. This is how they told stories and transformed stories over time. And this is just what they do. They still do it today. This technique was present in the religion. Like I said, the Hebrew Bible is mixed with Canaanite culture, Egyptian culture, Persian culture, Babylonian culture. You know, those were all the cultures that were around the Jews when they were writing the stories. And the New Testament is mixed just as much. But when you mix these stories, you're transforming the soul substance of narrative. And like when they formed Judaism, they mixed myths from the past to create their system. When they made Christianity, they mixed all of the Old Testament Judaism into a new form that we call Christianity. And when the Muslims came along, they transformed Hebrew religion and Christian religion and mythos of the two and completely retransformed them. And people look at that like that was a really nefarious thing. And people look at the Catholic Church just as nefariously for doing such things. But really, this is an old craft of magic, and this is what you do when you tell a new story to captivate the hearts and minds of the people. This is the craft of magic that you use, and this is how it works. And they're using it all over the world today, which, like, that's one of the cool things. If you stick it out with me, you'll start to see that this magic system that I'm talking about exists everywhere. It'll make you feel crazy. Fair warning. But the integration of narrative isn't just taking other myths and cultures of people that you're integrating with and integrating a story. Like if you look at the sociological aspects of why you would mix a story between two cultures to tell a new story, it has great importance. You know, I'm taking a story that you know over here and we're mixing together. We may not get along or see eye to eye, but if I take one of your stories and combine it with one of my stories, and then we have a shared story that we both understand, this is how you unite cultures. This is a big part of what we were doing. The book I referred to earlier, Mudha Malati, it was about it was a love story between somebody that practiced Sufi Islam, the mystical Islam, and somebody that practiced Hinduism or Buddhism, something like that. And so the story was about two lovers coming together of these two cultures, and so they're bringing those two cultures together. But no, it doesn't just exist in this way. Hebrew literature uses integration to integrate its own stories and transform them. And they do this at an accelerated rate sometimes, like in the Torah, in the book of Genesis. Like when God cuts himself in half and looks in his dark reflection and then passes through the mirror and embodies this new form he created. God created heaven and earth, and then he possesses it with this spirit when he says, be light, and that's his spirit passing through the mirror. And so heaven and earth was a new body. So this is Golem magic, to where you make a body to be possessed with the spirit. It's a form of Golem magic. So integration is a part of Golem magic, and that's the integration of body and spirit. So these things are connected as well. And the writers of Scripture crafted a body after the pattern of God crafting himself a body in the creation narrative. It's macrocosmic, microcosmic thinking. It's hard to explain this stuff. But then God cutting himself in half and then putting his spirit inside of the new body, like it's acted out again immediately on the sixth day of creation when God creates Adam. God breathes his spirit into him, just like he said, be light, and started to give life to the world and began the 6 days. God puts his spirit inside of Adam. And so now Adam is a new version of God. He's got God's spirit bringing his body to life. And what happens? God cuts him in half. It says it doesn't say he took a rib from Adam. It says it took one side of Adam and made Eve. Well, that just happened in the very first verse of Genesis when God cut heaven and earth from himself. So they just transformed round one into round two. And then they transform it into the story of Cain and Abel. Then they transform it into the story of Noah versus the world. And they describe Noah's ark floating on the surface of the water, almost verbatim, God hovering over the surface of the water. They don't use the word hover because he was floating on it. God was hovering over it. But they're just transforming the one thing into the next thing into the next thing. And this is what actually defines Hebrew literature as a genre. So, and the third main method of encryption is Gematria. And Gematria is the alphanumeric system of number in the alphabet. And they use Gematria to directly hide numbers in the text. And these numbers are a part of narrative. When God created heaven and earth, God, the heaven, the earth, if you add up the Hebrew spelling of those three words, it adds up to 777. Is that significant? Is 7 a part of the narrative of Scripture? I think so. And when God passes through the mirror and says, be light, well, if 7 represents God, and it represents God, heaven, earth. It's saying God is 7, heaven is 7, and earth is 7. And so when God passes through the mirror to bring heaven and earth back to life from chaos, that word be light, the Gematria adds up to 232. 2 plus 3 plus 2 is 7. 7 passing through the mirror, right? Yeah, that's not significant. What does God do? He creates a lineage. God has a son named Adam. Adam has a son named Seth. Cain and Abel is not included in the lineage of Genesis chapter 4 or 5. But that's because Seth means replacement. Seth replaced Abel. Cain was took out of the tree of life, the genealogy, because he was a murderer. But if you add up Adam's son Seth and Seth's son Enoch, and Enoch's Canaan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, Noah, Shem, Arphaxad, Selah, Eber, Peleg, Reu, something like that. Terah, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. If you add up the 22 patriarchs, the Gematria, the value of their names, it adds up to 7,000. And who are these people? These are the people with God's Spirit inside of them. God's 7. These people are possessed with 7. You add up the patriarchs of the nation of Israel, it adds up to 7,000. These are the people with 7 inside of them. So Gematria is part of the narrative of Scripture. The word Gematria is the Greek word geometry, and I had wondered for years why they call it geometry, the hiding numbers in the text. And I've been working with a guy named George Leoniak, and I've been learning a butt ton about geometry. It's been one heck of a ride over the past year learning geometry from this guy. And one thing about geometry is that geometric forms, polygons, polyhedra, are a naturally occurring form of encryption. First off, you can depict a 2D form and you can build it three-dimensionally. So a three-dimensional object is encrypted in a two-dimensional representation on a flat piece of paper. But within these geometric forms are all kinds of angles and faces and like hidden numbers. They actually contain hidden numbers if you're measuring them, and that's what geometry means. It means the earth measure. And so geometry is a natural medium to express hiding a number in something, but that's not the only way that nature is hiding numbers. Like, geometry is a truth that exists in nature and exists in the order of the universe. It's something real, and you don't really invent geometry, you just discover that things fit together in these ways. But nature's all full of numbers. Every circle has pi in it. You know, I like to point that out when I'm talking about this. So anytime you see a circle, it has numbers hidden in it. But you could say a hand has, 5 fingers, so the number 5 is connected to a hand. So you can represent a hand as 5, and then you have 5 members coming off your body. So 5 is a number that signifies a whole body. And this is because it's encrypted into the structure of your body. The structure of the year is full of numbers. You got 4 seasons, so 4 can represent seasons. You got 28 days in a moon cycle, so 28 can represent a month. You got 12 moons in a year, so 12 can represent a year. So nature's full of hidden numbers. So Gematria and directly encrypting information into a body of literature is another means of expressing and animating nature by the way you tell stories. And that's what's going on with Hebrew literature, 100%. And the fact that all 3 methods of encryption are a means of embodying the nature of the universe telling stories, it's a means of channeling a spirit into the book. They're channeling, like when you read the book, it causes the energy to, like light is bouncing off of the page and off of those symbols of the letters and passing through the mirror of your eye. And then this energy, this spirit that's in the book is passing through the mirror in your eye and bringing you to life. So all of this symbolism is acting out the very act of reading. And it's all acting out the movement of a spirit that created the world, passing from one body to the next, becoming all things. And that's divination, and that's an ancient craft of magic. So when we come back, I'm going to explain what magic is in the context of Hebrew literature, what they believe magic to be, and how they used it to understand the world. Because it's just a different language for understanding the world. It's nothing to be afraid of, even though you should be more afraid of the people that are going to hurt you for talking about it than you should be about it. And that's the sad truth. But I appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll have another presentation out soon. I hope you're well in the way.